Hello, fellow mutants. Welcome back to another video. And in this video, we're going to talk about 5 concerns that Screen Rant has. This will be for the Rey movie. So, as you guys probably know, Lucasfilm is planning to do a Rey movie, and how she is going to try to rebuild the Jedi Order after Kylo Ren ruined or destroyed Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order. And me personally, on one hand, I'm about it, but on the other hand, I'm happy that Disney is finally planning on doing something with the sequel trilogy characters. Only because I've been saying for the last few years that I'm kind of getting exhausted Disney trying to focus in on the prequel era, original trilogy era, between those two eras, or in between the prequel, or in between the original and prequel. Between the original and sequel eras, right? That I want them to take these new, the sequel trilogy characters on adventures. That, yeah, people like me who may not have enjoyed their theatrical appearances as much as maybe some other people, try at least give us reasons to enjoy the characters a bit more. Give us reasons why to enjoy Rey a bit more. Give us reasons to enjoy Finn, Poe, Rose Tico a bit more. Because I can tell you right now, the character that's my favorite, that it so happens to be a lot of fans, which I'm agreeing with, they underused. And that's Finn. Or mistreated. However you want to slice the dice. It's Finn. And I don't want to dislike these characters, but you haven't given me a very compelling reason to be a fan of the sequel trilogy characters, to be honest, Disney. So, yeah. And the closest thing is to, what? That Resistance show that had, Captain Phasma in, a few episodes, Kylo Ren in one episode, and Poe Dameron in a few episodes. That show was shit. Give us more shows, content in that era. Stop putting so much focus in the original trilogy era, the prequel trilogy era, between those two eras, and between those two time frames, and stop, doing so much, yes, on one hand, do some stuff in, post Return of the Jedi era, but at the same time, do stuff that's in post Rise of Skywalker era as well, is my point I am trying to make, that I want to see. And so, that's why I am, that part of me saying, yes, go through with this. Even though I would have loved Luke Skywalker's era of Jedi to flourish and whatever, in Legends, but yes, at least they're planning on doing something with the sequel trilogy characters, so I have to at least applaud them for that, after being a strong advocate for make content in the sequel trilogy with the sequel trilogy characters post Rise of Skywalker. So anyways, Star Wars New Jedi Order, Rey's new Star Wars movie, has a few challenges to overcome. Daisy Ridley will reprise her role as Rey in Sharman Obi-Chinoy's Star Wars film, which is expected to premiere in 2025. So in 2 years. The New Jedi Order will take place 15 years after the events of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, and will see Rey forming a New Jedi Order. This announcement of New Jedi Order at Star Wars Celebration 2023 was surprising, given that the Rise of Skywalker was promoted to be the end of the Skywalker saga. Let's be real, I figured it would be only a matter of time before they picked up the Skywalker saga and continue the story. So I'm not too surprised. Rey's new Star Wars movie means that Star Wars will get to revisit the sequel trilogy heroes far quicker than it revisited Luke or Anakin. Audiences will not have to wait decades to see Rey and other Star Wars sequel trilogy characters back in action. However, that short window between the Rise of Skywalker and the New Jedi Order also creates a few challenges. Which, I would have to say, the time jump between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker was a year. Yeah, it might be like a short window between Rise of Skywalker and New Jedi Order being 15 years. But I'd rather take that. I'd rather take 15 years than like 5 years or 5 months after the events of the sequel trilogy. To be honest. Because 15 years, like, you can undergo at least some changes. Sure, you'll still be growing, but at least some changes. And I feel like this, like, if they write her in a good way, could be extremely beneficial for Rey. Because, yeah, we could see how she matured, how she grew since the Rise of Skywalker. Did she take on the Palpatine name? Is she going to take on the Palpatine name in this movie, trying to redeem the Palpatine name? So in the galaxy, like, yeah, Chief Palpatine was a jerk. Rey Palpatine isn't. I like, this would be interesting. Like, admittedly, she could, like, there would be some things where Rey could have grown since the Rise of Skywalker. And not just Rey, but Finn. Does he become a Jedi? Does he get his first abilities in tuned? Who knows? And will we finally get to see Broom Boy? God damn it. After, like, getting him teased to be a Jedi in The Last Jedi, but not see him again in The Rise of Skywalker, will we see Broom Boy again in Rey's New Jedi Order movie? Who knows? Last read. The 5 issues New Jedi Order might encounter. The Rise of Skywalker problems makes Rey movies tricky. New Jedi Order is not Star Wars 10, but the film is a sequel to The Rise of Skywalker nonetheless. Though The Rise of Skywalker was far from the financial disappointment, the movie was the lowest grossing entry in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The Rise of Skywalker highlighted some of the Star Wars sequel's biggest problems, especially the lack of overarching plan for this trilogy. Star Wars The Last Jedi story had been very divisive, but The Rise of Skywalker as a movie, with confusing pacing and some significant retcons, Star Wars Episode 9 was not a solid conclusion for the Skywalker saga. And I think most people can agree with that The Rise of Palpatine was not a solid conclusion. Which also could be the reason why they're continuing with Rey. Because maybe they realized that at this point. The Star Wars sequel did not end on a high note. Therefore, having the next Star Wars movie directly continue the events of Rise of Skywalker is risky. More specifically, some of the decisions made in The Rise of Skywalker can make a new Rey Star Wars story sound less exciting than it should be. For example, the Rey Palpatine twist undid a lot of what The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi had done for the character. Yeah, because what if you guys are, like, coming in new to Star Wars, having no idea what they're talking about? Essentially, Last Jedi and Force Awakens made Rey a nobody, and then the Rise of Skywalker came in and said, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that. You're the granddaughter. You're the granddaughter of Palpatine." So that's what they're referring to. For those of you who may be saying, "What do they mean?" That's what they mean. Likewise, the death of every single Skywalker, including Ben Solo, can play against the next Star Wars movie. The Rise of Skywalker closed many doors, making New Jedi Order's job harder. So the sequel trilogy, divisive reception is still recent. That, oh my god, it's true. The Rise of Skywalker was marketed as the end of the Skywalker saga. As such, as divisive as the Skywalker Star Wars sequels had been, the trilogy had at least brought closer to several characters and storylines. Similarly, Palpatine Return may have been underwhelming, but at least the next Star Wars films would have a clean slate to reimagine the Star Wars galaxy. Now, the New Jedi Order picking up Rey's story so close to the events of The Rise of Skywalker, the sequel trilogy criticisms may resurface. As a comparison to it took more than a decade for Star Wars to revisit the prequels in a large capacity. And that is true. That is true. But at the same time, I know it might sound like I'm kind of creating excuses for Disney. But in this case, I'm not really. Because I'm hoping that Disney looked at the sequel trilogy and said, okay, we did not do some things very well. And hopefully, like, with the Rey movie, we're help to strengthen some of the weaknesses that the sequels had. You know? Something like that, I don't know. Make it where, like, Rey's more of a compelling character. God damn it. Apart from the animated series, Disney and Lucasfilm has mostly ignored the prequels until very recently. Compared to how the prequel trilogy was received upon its release, Episode 1, 2, and 3 are currently seen in a much better light. The prequel trilogy had time to age well, especially because those films became an entire generation's first Star Wars, present part included. I have stated numerous occasions that Revenge of the Sith was my first Star Wars movie that I have seen in duration, in completion, as to say. Because I saw the part where Anakin got his limbs cut off and then got burned. And that made me, like, really interested for some reason as an 11-year-old at the time. To go back to the beginning of the movie, rewatch it, and then go back to, like, The Phantom Menace, watch that, Attack of the Clones, rewatch Revenge of the Sith, then do the original trilogy. Because at the time there were only 6 movies, and I fell in love with the series. And then Clone Wars came out, like, the following year, after I just became a Star Wars fan. And the Clone Wars was my first Star Wars movie. Clone Wars set in the prequels. Both the movie and the show, of course. And oh my lord, that I fell in love. I fell in love with Star Wars. So, the line that says the prequel trilogy had time to age well, especially because those films became the entire generation's first Star Wars. Yes. Present party. And I feel like part of the reason, too, the reason why they aged well was because of both versions of the Clone Wars shows. Added another level of spice to the Clone Wars to make some of the weaknesses in the prequels that there have been stronger, right? And that's what I'm hoping this movie with Rey will do. The same thing for what the Clone Wars did to the prequels. Help strengthen some weaknesses, plot points that the prequels had, and made it stronger, better, if that makes sense. Fixed it. I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. Anyways, something similar could happen with the Star Wars sequels, which introduced Star Wars to the new generation. However, only 6 years separates the premiere, the Rise of Skywalker, and the expected New Jedi Order release date. Star Wars should revisit the sequel trilogy, but it may be too soon for that. And I can also see that it may be too soon for them to revisit the sequels. But yet again, I will also say, bring up the prequels. The Clone Wars movie came out 3 years after Revenge of the Sith, along with the show. And for the most part, the Clone Wars was well received. Sure, this was came 6 years after the would it be 6 years after the sequel trilogy ended. But who knows? Maybe this could help the sequel trilogy a bit. That, or it could just make the sequel trilogy look more like shit. One of those two. I do acknowledge that part as well. So yeah, timing is definitely everything. So who knows? Who knows? So Star Wars New Jedi Order movie risked another Rey retcon. The mystery about Rey's lineage set the tone for the sequel trilogy. However, the Rise of Skywalker's Rey Palpatine storyline felt like a massive retcon instead of a shocking, interesting plot hole twist. The Force Awakens introduced many mystery boxes, including who Rey's parents were. The Last Jedi seemingly solved that mystery and revealed that Rey was no one. One of the Last Jedi themes was about anyone could be a hero, no matter if that they were part of the mighty Skywalker lineage or not. Which, as much shit as the Last Jedi gets, I give it shit. But I have to say that was one of the best parts of the sequels. By making Rey a nobody, it did introduce the whole concept that you can be a badass without having to be related to anyone. Anyone special in the galaxy. And then, of course, Rise of Skywalker kind of had explosive diarrhea on that. Luke Skywalker had failed, and Rey could be a new beginning. The Rise of Skywalker went back on that with the Rey Palpatine twist. Rey's final scene in the Rise of Skywalker can be considered as the second lineage retcon. In addition to being a Palpatine, Rey was now also a Skywalker. Rey is taking the Skywalker name after training with Luke and Leia was an interesting concept, but the execution was flawed. By revisiting Rey's story shortly after the events of the Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars risked yet another Rey retcon. It's unlikely that Star Wars goes back on the Rey being a Palpatine. However, if Rey's new story, Star Wars movie, chooses to ignore the Palpatine twist, it will feel like another sequel trilogy retcon. Here's where I'll say this, because that was one of my biggest issues of the sequel trilogy, or at least with the Rise of Palpatine. Or Skywalker, sorry. Leia said, "Don't be afraid of who you are," right? Then Rey steals the Skywalker name. This movie is set 15 years after the events of Rise of Skywalker, right? Which means 15 years where Rey could have thought about it, considered Leia's words a bit more, and say, which I kind of briefly touched on earlier in this video, about not being afraid of who you are. Maybe this, within these 15 years, and maybe Rey makes a nod, a line or two, a 5-second nod, saying, "Yeah, I did. There was a time when I used the last name Skywalker, but to honor both of my master's teachings, especially my last master's teaching about don't be afraid of who you are, I'm using my birth name, Palpatine, to, one, not hide from my heritage, two, to show the galaxy I'm a Palpatine. There are good Palpatines, there are bad Palpatines. There are good Skywalkers, there are bad Skywalkers. Vader can be an example of a bad Skywalker per se when he was Darth Vader. But Luke, Leia, and me were all good Skywalkers, and even Anakin, when Anakin wasn't Vader, was a good Skywalker. My point is, 15 years after the events, Rey could make a message saying, yeah, you know, I did use the name Skywalker at the time, but I'm done hiding who I am. I am a Palpatine, but I'm not a dick like my grandfather was. I'm a better person than what my grandfather was. And it's time for me to show the galaxy that just because you have the name Palpatine does not make you evil. And be very, very interesting if she establishes that towards the beginning of the movie, or been establishing that, see what type of issues she deals with at first due to her being related to Sheev Palpatine. Because that would be interesting. That would be a very interesting concept to see on the big screen. Or on the small screen if they ever did a miniseries of Rey. Wouldn't that be an interesting concept? So, Star Wars has never continued a trilogy so quickly. Again, and you can kind of say that they kind of went back in between, but they kind of did with Clone Wars, because the Clone Wars came out in 2008. Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. And the Clone Wars thing ended till 2019, 2020. Actually, when was the final episode of the Clone Wars? Right, it came out the day before my birthday in 2020, February 21st, 2020. So, but season 7, but the first season came out with the movie, and the first season came out in 2008, 3 years after this original trilogy, the prequels came out. But to be fair, the Clone Wars was sandwiched in between. So that maybe they mean a continuation. Then the closest continuation that you can say to the prequels will have to be the Bad Batch, which then they have more leg room to use. Maybe that's what they're saying. Anyways, let's see what this means before I assume shit. A new Rey Star Wars story is exciting, yet Star Wars never once revisited as trilogy so quickly. For example, it took 32 years for Return of the Jedi to receive a sequel, The Force Awakens. Likewise, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the closest thing to a live-action Revenge of the Sith sequel, only happened 17 years after Episode 3. The first two Star Wars trilogies were left as nothing but trilogies. And now the Star Wars sequels era is breaking that trend. If you're talking about live action, then this has a point. But if you talk about animated, I'm sorry, but Clone Wars. And the Clone Wars movie, combination of the movie and the show, for the most part, has been received well. Partially because of good writing. Anyways, despite not being in Episode 10, New Jedi Order can be considered as a new entry in the Star Wars sequels. As the first Star Wars movie in 10 years, The Force Awakens was a pop culture phenomenon. Star Wars Episode 7 was a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi, meaning that it was 32 years in the making. The level of anticipation leading up to Star Wars Return is one of the reasons why The Force Awakens box office was so impressive. That's true. Previously, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the first theatrical Star Wars film since 1993, has experienced a similar scenario. Rey's Star Wars movie would not get a replic not blah, blah. Rey's Star Wars movie will not get to replicate this phenomenon, as it was released relatively close to the Rise of Skywalker. Rey's Star Wars movie could feel like a Star Wars 10. After so many years without solid updates of the next Star Wars movie, it seemed like Lucasfilm was taking its time before moving from the Skywalker saga once and for all. The Rise of Skywalker was promoted as the conclusion of all three trilogies. After all, after the Star Wars sequels, Star Wars no longer had a necessity to revisit Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader. Therefore, Palpatine's death in Rise of Skywalker was the perfect setup for a new non-Skywalker related Star Wars story. However, New Jedi Order risks feeling more like Star Wars Episode 10 than something truly new. If Rey is returning, then several other Star Wars sequel trilogy characters should be expected to return. Rey putting together a New Jedi Order is the perfect opportunity to make Finn a Jedi, for example. Names like Grogu and Jason Syndulla could also work as part of Rey's new Jedi Order. On one hand, revisiting established Star Wars characters can be good for the next Star Wars film. On the other, Star Wars New Jedi Order means that Star Wars is not really moving from the Skywalker saga. Rey herself is a Skywalker. More like wannabe Skywalker. Fortunately, projects like Star Wars The Acolytes and Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi can tackle unexplored eras. Rey's new Star Wars movie can be the big tentpole release that will bring the saga back to the silver screen, building up for the already established characters. Despite the listed challenges, Rey's new Star Wars film is one of the franchise's most exciting projects in years. An immediate sequel to the Star Wars trilogy is uncharted territory for the saga, making Star Wars The New Jedi Order unpredictable and quite promising. Like I said, this could like with the Clone Wars, both versions of the Clone Wars, you can say. Whichever one you want to say is your canon Clone Wars. I feel like the Clone Wars complemented at least some of the prequels' weaknesses. And I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, compliment, I mean, like, use the weaknesses and build up stories to make those weaknesses into, like, strengths. But, of course, you have to watch the Clone Wars to do that. And, like I said, maybe Rey's story will do the same. I'm hoping. I'm trying to be optimistic here. Like I said, I have been advocating for this. Something like this, for Disney to do something sequel trilogy. Tell some stories with a sequel trilogy character or two in it. Even if it's like I didn't even care if like Rey was going to be a background character. But, or like Finn or Poe or Rose, but I was just so tired of Star Wars focusing so much on the prequels era and the original trilogy era that I wanted something for after, either like shortly after the sequel trilogy era or like for after. Because I wanted, there's like such like a fast timeline in Star Wars. Why just focus on like 2/3 points for the most part when there's like vast majority? So that's my point. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Love you guys. Wonderful day. Be kind to one another. May the force be with us all.